Dr. Sarah Moseley, welcome to Speaker Spotlight.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
It's fabulous to get you in your beautiful, colourful office. It's great to have you sat down. So talk to me about your career and your work within dyslexia and neurodiversity.
I've started off working within education. I usually say that I've got over 30 years of working in education and working in the classroom, and I stop at 30, really. I've got more than that. I have just basically started off working with a teaching assistant, ended up as a head teacher, and have worked within mainstream education and then right across within special education, primary and secondary. And really, it was one of the big kind of influences in everything that I've done is that I was always interested in children that struggled. And I was always interested in why learners struggled and what it was, and particularly around reading. And because it is something that some children just get and some really have so many difficulties. And it's kind of looking at, what are those what are those barriers? And actually, when you're a mainstream classroom teacher with 30 in the class and you've got quite a few who are really struggling, you just can't support them as much as they need, and it's like, what can you do? What are the quick wins?
And that's one of the big, especially in mainstream and state schools, teachers,
Yeah.
a majority of teachers want to do good by their students, but
Yeah.
when limited resources, big classroom sizes, it's so hard. And some as well don't have teachers, and it's so difficult to make sure those students are being supported, and it's so easier for children to fall behind and miss those things. So it can be really challenging.
Yeah, and I think we all want to do a good job, but it's actually, and in particular with reading, in particular with literacy, there's so much information out there. And I think the issue is actually that can be more confusing because there's so much. So I started off and that kind of working within education, working as a head teacher, and then had my son. And actually, when you're ahead of a school, the big thing is that you lose that ability to actually do the thing that you really were passionate about because you're doing so many other things. And and,
Absolutely.
and my PhD is in the teaching of reading, in supporting learners, in like looking at the most appropriate ways forward. And it was really difficult to use that. So I came out and I worked within set up my own consultancy, and then actually I've been able to work with and support so many more individuals and children and families. So it's been great.
And it's the difference that you make. Absolutely what you're saying. They're not only just for children and young people, but for their families and for
Yeah.
their future. It just reinstalls that confidence within them, saying, no, you can do it. It's just finding those methods and strategies that work for you. So, Sarah, as a teacher, as a head teacher, as a consultant, as all these amazing things that you've done in your career, what strategies do you, I know there's probably so many, but what main strategies have you noticed that can really support young people with reading?
Oh, I mean, the main thing, which I'm always saying, is have some fun. It's like make it fun because actually, no, you're not going to learn anything. You can't make someone learn to read. Actually, they have to buy into it. And if they're only going to buy into something when there is some kind of enjoyment or something out of it for you. So I'd say it's like the fun, make it meaningful, mean something to them, see why it's going to be something that's going to support them. And from with that means start from what they can do, start from what they love. What are they interested in? Know our learners, know our children and young people, get their opinions and find out what does work. There's loads of discussions around coloured overlays and kind of whether that actually is effective and how effective that is for some young people with dyslexia. But actually, ask the child or ask the young person, does this make it easier? Is this colour better than this colour? Does this kind of is this something that makes it easier to see the print? Is it better if the print's larger or smaller? But also, find out. I've got a 7-year-old who's just due to be 8 very soon, and it's all about Minecraft, and it was Pokemon, not so much now. But it's like, don't ask me what the words are for you to find the next things for your treasures. Let's work out how to read those words or how to spell those words or how to recognize those words yourself so you can do it. And he wants to do it.
And it's that patience as well, isn't it? It's not,
Yeah,
it's taking your time, actually sitting with your child and going through
yeah.
these, even those challenging words, and not making them feel, and it's easily done, it can be frustrating, but it's really being patient and embracing that as well, and really support them as well, and
Yeah.
praise them when they say that word right or they read that. It's that validation, isn't it?
And it's those little wins as well, and that's something that I think in every school that I'm working with, with every family I'm working with, it's about, we're not celebrating enough. And I think that's purely because of the pressure on what we're doing in terms of the teaching of reading. And also, you know, how many schools or how many families are sent home the sheets of sounds to practice or the words to practice? How many times are you sent home all the things they can do that you can put up on the fridge or put up on the wall of like, wow, you know, in my day when I first started teaching, be like a little envelope of words or a little packet of words. You know, these are all the ones I know. These are all the sounds I know. Let's celebrate that, as opposed to, okay, these are the ones we've got to work on next. So you know, absolutely right there. It's about celebrating those quick wins and those small wins, because it's very easy. And I think if a child struggled by the time they're 5, really, that they're going to have that kind of element to anything that's print based that shuts down, because it's, you know, and if they're 11 or 12, you know, you've got a huge barrier around actually getting them to feel that it's okay to take a risk, because actually it's a massive risk to show that, do you know what, I'm really struggling with this, and the only way they're going to learn is to have that struggle. So it's about that kind of, you know, confidence, and making sure that we're aware of how much of an effort it takes when you're 9, 10, 11 to actually even kind of participate in some of these things, and again celebrate that.
Absolutely. And you know, it's really interesting you mentioned that, especially that age 10 and 11
Yeah,
where you're going to go secondary school
yeah,
and that next stage of life. I want to talk to you just about comparison. So at that
yeah,
age, you might be aware of your peers, you might be aware,
absolutely.
even parents in the playground, where it's like, oh,
Yeah,
Charlie's on age such and such for reading, or you know, it's that thinking, oh,
yeah,
where my child should be up to, where, you know, as a young person, where I'm up to academically. And it's about not having those expectations
yeah.
and doing your best and not comparing yourself to everyone else in the
Yeah.
classroom.
And I think as well, having, you know, worked lots in this area with lots of different kind of professionals, as well as families, it's also about finding all that stuff they can do really well, and getting success in that, and just making sure that you're allowing them to see. It's that whole thing around, and I know, you know, discussions around, oh, your brain works differently, and you know, it's a superpower. And actually, for so many children, that's not going to be how it's seen, and we have to kind of buy into the fact that actually, do you know what, all our brains work differently. It isn't just your brain that works differently. Every brain works differently, and we feel things differently, and we see things differently, and we perceive things differently, we remember things differently. And I think then when you can start to kind of get that, and so kind of drawing that out into everything that you can do, then you've got more chance of kind of like, do you know what, you find that a bit more difficult. Actually, so do I. Because I don't think we often say enough about that the journey to becoming a reader is never ending. We'll always come across words that we still don't know.
So you
Do our
continuous
young people
learning.
know that? Do they know that? That actually you don't just get to a point and be like, oh, right, yeah, great, I've finished now. I'm a reader.
So Sarah, for the first time, you'll be at the Dyslexia Show in 2024. How excited are you to be involved in the event for the first time?
Oh, I can't wait. I was desperate to be involved. Yeah, I badgered Aaron to say, look, it'd be really good to kind of have me speaking. I've got my book out this year, and it's doing really well. And so what's really nice there is I can kind of talk to people. It's full of practical strategies. So yeah, and I'm really excited. It's gonna be good.
So tell me a little bit about your book as well, because that's so exciting that the book's going to be released.
Yeah. So it's out now, and it's all about teaching reading. It's interesting because it's about teaching reading to learners with complex needs. Initially, it was written for learners within either special schools or within specialist provision. But actually, as I was writing it, and the more people that became involved, I've got case studies in it. I've got ideas in action where people have talked about what happens when they change their approach to teaching reading, and they add the fun, or they add the expectations that we're all readers, and we start from that. It became kind of, as I've always known, that it's actually for everyone, because it's about what we do if we've come to a point that we are stuck in terms of teaching reading. Where do we start? What do we do to get it moving again? And I think for many of our young people, many of our children, they're in that position where it's kind of like, oh, we've done this, now what? And sometimes it's quite tricky for us to remember that learning, education, it's about the fun. It's about us. We've got the skills, we've got the knowledge, but just reflecting on actually what else works for that young person. What do we find that engages them, that motivates them? So yeah, so the book's just full of lots of strategies, but it's based on theory, on the theory of, you know, how we learn to read, and how we can make sure that we just use that to give ourselves a tool bag of approaches, that no one thing works for any one child all the time. And in fact, one thing might work for a short period, then we have to mix it up again and do something else. And particularly with reading, we find that, because you do have to keep going with it.
It's just such an amazing achievement that you've done. So the fact you have a book and all the amazing work that you've done in your career is just extraordinary. And the book is not just perfect for teachers and teaching assistants and educators, it's also great for parents as well.
Yeah, I've got quite a few families that are using it and have spoken to me about it. I had a lovely review recently from a consultant who works within SEMH sort of provisions and looking at that real struggle with 15, 16-year-olds who haven't kind of mastered the sort of basics of learning to read. And actually, again, it's about, you know, what do we do? Where do we begin? Okay, what do they know? What do they like? Why would it be useful for them to learn to read? Because they've got to buy in. So I think that's the kind of key with it all.
It must be just so rewarding, though, that being able to help, especially young people who are really struggling to overcome those obstacles. It's so rewarding.
When I did my PhD, I also created a measure of how we felt about ourselves as learners, and it was for learners with severe learning difficulties, and the impact that actually learning to read or not learning to read or not being considered as a reader has upon how we feel about ourselves. And the impact was massive, which we know that right across the board. It impacts on how we feel about ourselves as learners, about us, you know, in terms of our well-being, and actually thinking, oh, do you know what, I'm just not a reader, or I'm just not going to be able to do that. It has a massive impact on your life chances, on everything else that you do, you know, you do next. And actually you avoid certain situations because you don't want to put yourself into a situation where that might be questioned or that view of yourself might be threatened. And that's, you know, that's why it's key literacy. It's absolutely key for everything. And it's not just about that academic success. It's about us having choices in life. It's about us communicating how we feel. It's about us just feeling better about what we're going to do next.
Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to do Speaker Spotlight. In the meantime, between now and the show, where can people find you? And more importantly, where can people buy your book?
You can buy it at Routledge. They've got 30% off at the moment, but also on Amazon. And my website at drsarahmoseley.com. It has got lots of information. If you subscribe there, you can actually find, I do newsletters that I send out with all the information about what I'm doing next, but also some handy tips. Or you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, or the usual social media channels under Dr. Sarah Moseley.